program will be recorded, so I have the opportunity to review the information after the fact. Very excited that we had over 400 people register, already over 100 on the line this morning. So a fantastic turnout. We're excited to have everyone with us today. Willing to bet just about all of you are pretty familiar with Zoom at this point in time. But just so you know, there's a chat option available to you. If you click on the chat, you'll see the chat will display on the side of your screen and gives you the opportunity to communicate with everyone that's here participating in the program. And we'll be keeping an eye on that and using it as an opportunity to share your questions with our panelists later in the program. See some folks dropping in the chat where they're logging in from. Very exciting to see that. If you want to go ahead and do that, I'm happy to see all those other places popping up. See South Carolina, DC, Philly, Denver. All right, Atlanta, couple Denvers, Baltimore, Connecticut, Memphis, Tennessee, Brooklyn. Wow, all the way out to the West Coast. I see San Francisco, PA, Queens, Brooklyn, Finkelstein Memorial. Hi, Elizabeth. Oceanside. Hey, Tony. Detroit, Michigan. Is that Morning, New York? Brooklyn, Texas. All right. Los Angeles. It's exciting to have folks with us from all over the country. North Carolina, Queens. Better get somebody on here from Staten Island. We're missing Staten Island.
We're gonna rep Staten Island, Jeremy. Come
right, on. That's right. Are you on Staten Island, Shante?
Yes.
All right. See, good. All right. I want all the boroughs represented. I don't want to get in trouble. Right. Palisades, Long Island, Westchester coming in. Oh, another Staten Island. Oh, there's Tracy and Troy. Mount Vernon. All right. All right, I'm going to follow my instructions as per the slide. It is 11:35 a.m. sharp. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Johannesson. I'm the Executive Director with the New York Library Association, and it is my absolute honor to welcome you all here today. This program is being put forward by the New York Black Librarians Caucus, which is a roundtable of the New York Library Association since 2018, and we're absolutely thrilled to have the caucus as a roundtable of the organization and provide the caucus with a broader platform to highlight the work that they do. Excited that 2020 is the 50th anniversary for the New York Black Librarians Caucus, and so this is timely and exciting for them and for us to be having this take place now. Before we kick things off, I want to remind you that this is the first of 6 webinars that we'll be putting forward and that the caucus is organizing, so be on the lookout for information and registration details for the other upcoming portions of this series. And I would like to introduce the moderator for today's program, which is Shante Burns-Simpson, who is currently the manager for school support and outreach at the New York Public Library, where she's also held several other positions. Shante is currently the president of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, BCALA, and is proud to have held other positions within that organization and during their 50th anniversary. She's also the former chair of ALA's Committee on Diversity, a member of the Association for Library Services to Children, ALSC, as well as the Young Adult Services Association, YALSA, and part of their Train the Trainer program, a past president for the Reference and Adult Service section of NYLA, and a past president of the New York Black Librarian Caucus. So thank you, Shante, for serving as our moderator today. And with that, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I'm not being camera shy, but I'm not able to start my video, so I don't know what happened. But I would like to just say thank you. There I go. So hello, everyone. Okay. And I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you all are. I would like to just start off by saying, I hope you are all ready to hear from an amazing group of females who are prepared to keep it real with you today. Oops, wait, my apologies. We have a prestigious group of human beings that will give their personal insights on code switching. So welcome to Conversations from the Heart, Part 1, Code Switching. So now to ensure that we are all working from the same definition, I would like to say code switching is the process of shifting from one language or dialect to another, depending on the social context or conversational setting. So hence the two examples of me welcoming you today. So now many libraries have staff that are predominantly white, and many BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color who work in these spaces feel forced to code switch in order to be heard. So today we're going to discuss job interviews, dealing with patrons, dealing with fellow staff members, are all situations that force people of color to code switch in their library world. And these are just a few things that we will be discussing today. So I hope you are all ready and prepared to drop your questions in the chat box. We will have people looking at them, and we will try to get to some of the Q&A at the end of this session. So I would like to start off with a book to my fellow librarians, and I will showcase the book, The Souls of Black Folk. W.E.B. Du Bois writes, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity." This was written over 100 years ago, and still this double consciousness exists through what we call code switching. So now, how do you find yourself code switching in your daily life? I would like all participants to sit and really think about that. While you're thinking about this, I would like to take a minute to have our panelists introduce themselves. So I would like to start off with Michelle Eccles. Michelle, you're muted.
Okay, here we go. There we go. Good morning, everyone. How are you? I am Sandra Michelle Eccles. I'm an adjunct professor, but I like to call myself an accomplished librarian because I've had the opportunity to work at both public and academic libraries. I am currently adjunct professor, and I'm also a consultant. That's it, and I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Next, we have Taina Evans.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Taina Evans, and I currently work at Brooklyn Public Library as a regional librarian. I've been at this institution for about 14 years now. I'm very active in NYLA. I was a part of RAS. I'm part of New York Black Librarian Caucus. I also am very active in American Library Association. Was the past chair of the Library Service Committee for Aging Population. And I was also on ASCLA, as many of you know, have been dissolved, but currently I'm a member at large of RUSA as well. And I'm working in a capacity for the RSS division within RUSA. Lastly, I'm an adjunct professor at St. John's University, where I also received my bachelor's and master's degree.
Thank you, Taina.
Thank you.
Next, we have Shakima Miller.
Excuse me. Good morning. I'm Shakima Miller. I am currently at the Nassau Library System as their outreach and partnership specialist. Prior to that, I was at Brooklyn Public Library for 19 years. Very proud of that and very proud of the borough of Brooklyn from which I was born. I am a little different, I think, than others in that I have not served as a public librarian, but has always been in administration. So that's where my point of view has come from. And I am very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakima. And last but certainly not least, we have Peyton Powell.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Peyton Powell. I am a librarian assistant at the Library in Rockland County. I'm what you call, I guess, a library lifer. I have been in the library for over 20 years, which is a big number to say out loud. I started young and just kind of stayed and worked my way up. I'm currently a library school student. I finished 1 year. I have 1 more year to go. Shout out to those in the struggle. And I'm also a high school teacher. I've been a high school teacher for about 16 years. So thank you all for joining and welcome.
Thank you so much, Peyton. I'm a lifer too. So thank you, everyone. And now let's get back to our original question. So panelists, what are your experiences of code switching in librarianship? I can go out of order, but I will start with you. Yes, Michelle, go ahead.
All right. So my experience with code switching is I came into the field as a professional from nonprofit. So I came in, my first position was at the Queensborough Public Library as a full-time youth counselor. At that time, they didn't want a lot to be in that role, so they hired someone that had the skill set from youth development. I had to learn quickly and code switch all day, every day there. I look at code from the linguistic side because working in a teen library, I don't know if anyone ever worked, in teen library, somebody might be out there, you will find yourself speaking to your colleagues in one voice and turn around and speaking to the youth in another voice. As I shared with the panel previously, I said, one day I was in the back running a book club and, we had one hat on, and next thing I know, I had to code switch because there was a fight breaking out, and I literally yelled from the back of the room to this young man. I just yelled out something that he would understand from the barbershop, which was, "Yo, my man." And everybody, the whole room totally got quiet at that instance. And they were like, "Oh my goodness, did Miss Michelle just yell like that? Who's that in Miss Michelle's body?" So at that moment, you code switch. Having been in librarian school, had to code switch there too. We moved from our African-American vernacular to the academic vernacular. So for me personally, it's just an everyday part of life, and you use it when you need to use it, and you do things differently. Anybody else on the panel?
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah, does anybody else want to take that question? Shakima?
I'll take it. Yeah, so one of the ways that I've had to code switch is like policing my tone so that I am not considered the angry Black woman. And there were, I could think of an example of when I was actually congratulating someone for like taking up for me in a meeting. And when I was quoting how the person took up for me, it was like, well, I didn't say it like that, like in that tone. And I'm like, I thought I was speaking in a regular tone, but excuse me. And so that had me like kind of think about how I say things and sometimes not say things. Also, just not sharing my interests. So as we're sitting in groups and everyone's talking about the television shows and the movies and the books that they're into, and it's like, either I don't know what you're talking about or I'm not necessarily interested in those things, but then I didn't share because when I have shared, I've gotten blank stares. And so it's like, it's either just being quiet or just like nodding head. And even down to how I wear my hair, like just wear it in a bun. And now I still do like twists and things like that, like things that I would do on the weekend. I brought it into work now, but before it's something that I wouldn't have done.
Shakima, you hit on a lot of stuff right there. You really did. I mean, code switching can be both a tool for survival and social mobility. So now how can we be ourselves but still fit in the library or professional world? Because you hit on a lot of things that I'm just like, yes. Anybody, can we just say examples of how we can, or be ourselves, or do we just, we'll just leave that outside of work?
No, I feel like, with code switching, outside of the linguistic definition that we shared earlier with the slides, there's also the behavioral aspect of it that Shakima touched on with hair. But for me, coming into code switching, into the library profession, fresh with my MLS degree, I felt like I had a good understanding of standard English. And the branch that I was placed in, I had to switch to African Vernacular English or Ebonics or all of that so that my patrons can have an understanding of where I was coming from. But within the library world, when you use the term like, as a tool for social mobility, I took code switching to avoid being looked at differently in terms of stereotypes. Black librarians are lazy. Black librarians are not interested in comics or graphic novels. Black librarians start their meetings late or not on time. And so I was trying to make sure that I fit in to a work culture that really like that for me, my strategy was really to just align with how I felt the culture was going to be accepting and how I didn't want to be looked at differently if I wasn't code switching. And so, I think as a tool, when you're first coming into the profession, you're not really understanding from what areas or what venue, or how to really assimilate to your work culture. I think from library school, they're telling you, well, this is how it is to be professional, and this is how it is to have the dominant culture perspective of what professionalism is. You don't feel like you can initially bring your whole self to that institution because as some, it might be, I don't want to be perceived as that angry Black woman, and I also don't want to look detrimental to those to my fellow African American colleagues who might be looking at me through the social climb.
Right, and just to jump behind Taina's point, I just want to go back to my experience with code switching. I work in a predominantly white space, so when a non-person of color feels like they can speak above me with the assumption that I won't understand, I find myself feeling the need to code switch, and I have to use that as a reminder, to white people that yes, we are all on the same level here, because I find that the assumption is that you are starting on a level below everyone else in the room. And that the idea of code switching, is like an adaptation that people of color have to make, when they read the room and can see that the people in it assume that you are not on the same playing field as they are. Whether it's being spoken over or rudely corrected in front of other people or told about your tone is aggressive or scary. But I find myself having a code switch, just to get rid of the assumption that, non-people of color would have when they feel like they can speak around you as if you're irrelevant. So I feel like code switching is like a constant proving of your worth, which is both tiring and, racially driven.
You're so point on, Peyton, both Peyton and Taina. So I do want to identify that the department for professional employees back in 2018, they said only 6.8% of librarians identified as Black or African American. But I want to point out, because you guys did highlight some stereotypes, how does implicit bias work to create a barrier for Black people in librarianship?
Yeah, I can take that. So implicit bias works to create barriers while you're code switching, in the sense that we are using it as a coping strategy rather than as a platform to attack racism or a culture that's institutionally built around a dominant norm that marginalize BIPOC community. So the barriers, it could be, you know, as W.B. Du Bois was speaking about, that double consciousness, in where you're taking on a lot of trauma and a lot of that burden because you are using it as a coping strategy, and really being complicit in those biases that you receive because you don't want to be looked at a certain way, because you want to fit in a certain way, and because you want to you know, maintain the status quo. But unfortunately, and to our detriment, we are unconsciously perpetuating what we are seeking to avoid.
Right, I completely agree. Like, when one type of identity is considered the norm or the standard, we invalidate everybody else that doesn't fit into that standard. So the idea that one identity is superior to others forces people to be put into boxes, you know?
Anybody else want to jump in? Shakima?
I mean, I thought of it from another point of view, not just ours, but outside of us. It's like what I'm continuing to hear as we are having these different conversations all over is that people of color aren't applying for the jobs or aren't in the profession. And that is simply not true. I mean, we're here, we exist, but I think about the fact that we could probably have more people. I forgot the percentage, but our percentage has, we said the percentage earlier, but our percentage hasn't changed much over years of how many people of color exist in our profession. And one of the things I thought about was, like, we can start with the interactions as members of the public, right? So a lot of people of color may not either had a positive experience at the library, and that's coming from anybody because of somebody else's biases about them. Their experience may not have been positive. And so why would you want to continue to use the service, much less join the profession? And then it's just like representation. So that's where I was coming from with the implicit bias thing. And the other thing is just like, people don't even think they have bias. And I think it's starting with admitting that we have bias. Everyone does. Just checking your bias is where you start to heal everyone and heal everything. It's like that first step.
Yeah, checking your bias. I like that.
Yeah,
I don't want to skip over Michelle. Yes.
No, I was just saying, I agree with Shakima, checking your biases, but also, you know, you come into this profession, and a lot of times I'm a career changer. So I didn't enter the profession as a lifer, although I was a page early in high school, and then went on to other, you know, to experience other careers. But, you know, what I find in librarianship is that it's assumed that a person of color needs to work in their community, right? That you're the only one that can reach this community. And I felt like in some of my positions, I felt after working in the teen library and moving around in Queens Library, but just other jobs that I might have interviewed for, they always wanted to place me in the communities of color. And what my skill set didn't necessarily, if you did a blind interview that just looked at my resume, you would have saw that, wait a minute, this woman has this, she can do this, she can do that. Why am I placing her in this place? Because of their their own implicit bias in terms of that it takes the African American woman to be in the space where you work in the community because she could do the mother role, or, you know, the role of babysitting being able to reach the student with, being able to reach the patron or customer, or whatever name they want to give the person at that time, whatever name is popular, that we're able to do this. But, if you look back historically to the field of librarianship, in the 1970s, Black women move up, but yet they place you in places where they felt you can control the crowd. Why do I need to control the crowd? And I'll leave that.
Yes, don't leave it right there, because that just goes to our next question. Both you and Shakima touched upon it, is how do librarians, I guess, code switch to even get those interviews or those promotions? Like, how do we get
that? But for a Black woman, if you want to move around in the field of librarianship, come out the union, take the chances, get the grant funded positions, because those grant funded positions will afford you an opportunity to grow your skills. I feel the union positions only leave you in that box to play the mammy, the nanny, the caregiver, the person that's only able to reach the person in that community. Once you acquire those skills, then you can move on. But how did I acquire my skills? As I said, I was a career changer, but I also took advantage of a lot of courses. Before we got big with this thrust into remote learning, I was always finding a course to learn remotely. Web Junction has a lot of great courses that you can take that will be able to help you build your skill sets. And I was just looking for ways to build my skill set, because I was tired of my white colleagues coming over to me saying to me, I want to pick your brain. No, you can't pick my brain, right? That's not happening. So I was tired of that. So I said, well, what can I do to make myself to stand out in the crowd? So I code switched to stand out in the crowd, but not to be the angry Black woman, because I was becoming angry, because you would sit in meetings and you would say something one way, and then you turn around in that very same meeting 10 minutes later, your white colleague would say the very same thing you just said, turn around and get all the applause at the table. So I started doing what my grandmother said, growing up, she taught us this, she taught us this little saying that said, a still tongue keeps a wise head. So when I started going to meetings and they would say, do you have anything to say? Nope, I have nothing. I just adopted the still tongue, but yet I was quietly building my resume so that I could be able to be more. That's my code switch.
I think that Black librarians code switch to get the interviews because there's an exaggerated difference between Black and white people, which leads to the exaggeration between Black and white languages. And so because the perception of racial differences, I feel like BIPOC community feel like they have to emulate or talk white in order to feel like that's how they can fit in to get into those spaces, rather than the alternative was really bringing their true authentic self, right? Because they don't want to, again, have that perception of not being professionalism. And so as you're moving between spaces, whether you're just coming into the profession or if you're going for a promotion or, stepping out of the union, it's just been an exaggeration that you have to talk a certain way in order to maintain or be looked at outside of traditional stereotypes, like outside of that nanny role, outside of just being useful to that particular demographic that you're currently serving. How can you actually be a strategic planner, or can you really step outside of frontline librarianship, right? Like, we tend to see, and it's no secret that a lot of CEOs and library directors are not individuals of color, right? So it's not enough just to linguistically code switch, and that's why they say, and we're a panel of African American women, but you have to work twice as hard, because code switching is just, again, one of those strategies in the toolbox. The next thing, as Sandra mentioned, is what skill are you bringing to the table? So you have to do more than just talk in the American Standard to get your foot in the door.
Changing their names. So like my name is Shakima. If you look at that, you're going to think this woman is probably a Black woman. My name is intentional and I love it. But I also know that there are studies out there that say if there's a Black sounding name, your resume might be passed over. My middle name is a more Eurocentric sounding name. And at one point it was like, should I use my middle name instead, just to make sure that I get that foot in the door? And I'm sure that there are others that have done that, because code switching is part of making others comfortable, right? And so if I have that sound, that Eurocentric sounding name, that might make somebody more comfortable in wanting to interview me. But also it could be just downplaying your cultural identity, or not expressing your opinions because they may be deemed aggressive, and keeping quiet when experiencing or witnessing microaggressions or even full out racist behaviors, because you know that you want to go somewhere. So you shut your mouth so that people don't think of you in that way. Like they think of you as on their side. And so
Yeah,
those are, yeah.
it's that group think, right? It's that homogenous thinking. Like if I can show that I have the shared interests of that dominant group, then I'm going to get that promotion, because everyone at this level thinks this way. Like this is the appropriate way that we're supposed to merge our thoughts and ideas. So maybe not be able to, like my name, Taina, which is a Afro-Latina name, saying it Tiana, you know, they jack it up so many times. Jack it up, you know, that's my Ebonics went out. They jack it up so many times. And I'm like, no, my name is Taina. And they're like, Ty, can I just call you T? Can I? And I'm like, no, I have to affirm who I am in this space. Like this is, you know, if I'm going to be in this culture, I want to, you know, and if I'm going to break these spaces, break barriers to get into these spaces, I want everyone in the room to also make me feel like I'm comfortable in bringing my whole authentic self to the table. And I don't want to just make everyone else in the room feel comfortable because I was able to code switch. Like one of the things that we see far too often when we get into those spaces and don't affirm who we are is those microaggressions. And it can be viewed in a myriad of ways. One example of code switch from a different perspective is that we all saw Amy Cooper at Prospect Central Park, and she code switched real quickly. And she said, if you don't stop bothering me, I'm going to call the cops. And Christian Cooper said, call the cops. And we all heard her code switch.
Absolutely.
And she screamed and said, there's an African American. So we can see that other people code switch when they don't want us to know what they're saying. And they intentionally leave BIPOC community out of their conversations because they have an established practice as well.
But you know that microaggression and that entire scenario that you're talking about has to do coming from a position of power, which we don't come from a position of power when we're working within any kind of institution or organization. So being that it is what it is, we're either categorized, we're codified, we're ostracized. And code switching has been going on for 400 years. I mean, and you were talking, I think, Shakima, you were talking about that Eurocentric, you know, coming from that space where you have to even, you can't even accept, you know, like promote or even be yourself, whoever you are, being a Black woman or a Black Latina woman or somewhere in between, because you want to be accepted. And then I'm sure many of you have heard about the instances where women, Black women, it was an issue of their hair, you know, and that wasn't even accepted within an organization. I've gone to interviews and I can tell the look, oh, wait a minute, you know, and they automatically profile you. And that profiling has been going on, not only in law enforcement, but in the employment scene. And so what do you do with that? And how do you navigate that? So we code switch because we know that we're trying to assimilate, because the bottom line is that we have to make that money. You know, we're out there working unless any of us have our own business. But even then, So we code switch to assimilate, and even, let's say you walk in the door, which is my experience. African American and Caribbean, I also speak Spanish. You walk in the door, you have creds, you have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, you're educated, all right? On top of that, you have talent, you have skills. So you walk in the door and you say, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to show them my talent and show them what I have to offer. At the same time, you're not supposed to. You can be talented, but like someone was talking about being, a nurturer, the mama, doing the right thing and helping nurture and being passive, but don't be too much, like in our face with your talent and your skill. So you're being oppressed and suppressed at the same time. So it's a double-edged sword. And we're constantly walking that tightrope of not being ourselves, but at the same time trying to be accepted. And that is something that we're wrestling with. And what I would like to see at some point in time, and I'm part of so many Zoom meetings about this having to do with what's happened with Black Lives Matter, the whole issue. I'd like to see some kind of discussion or action. Or what do we do? How do other people accept us for being who we are and what we are, and so that we can not assimilate, so that we can work our 9-to-5 job, make our money, and function like everybody else with having to deal with all these other issues.
Okay, thank you so much, Dolly. And I do
Sorry, I
want to
didn't mean.
be respectful, but everybody has to stay muted. We know a lot of people have questions that they want to get through, but you have to put it in the chat. It's just not fair. So I do want to go and address what you asked, but we do have other people who went through the chat and put in their questions. So if anybody wants to answer what she just asked, but please, nobody else unmute yourself to move forward to make a point. This chat is on fire. I see everyone putting in their comments and their questions, and we need to go through that order. So thank you. So does anybody have anything that they want to say to what Dolly had to say?
I heard her share her experience. I didn't hear a question. I'm so sorry. Did she ask a question?
About Black Lives Matter. How can we move forward with just being able to do our work, good work, without feeling like we have to hide behind our good work or have to lessen it so that they could feel comfortable.
So I say do it and don't lessen it and don't worry about making them feel comfortable. It is something that I've sessions with our directors and our staff around anti-racism and Black Lives Matter. And what we say is very in your face. And we have had some people who have mentioned that they were not necessarily comfortable with the conversation, but it's not to make you comfortable. The point is you want them to feel uncomfortable so that changes can be made. So unless you feel like you may lose your job, just do it. That's what I say. Like, that's at the point that I'm at. I say, I don't know if it's because of my big age, but at this point, I'm just doing it because I want to and not worrying about anybody's comfort.
And that goes back to that original thought. Does code switching, does that ultimately hurt us in the long run?
I don't think it ultimately hurts us. I think that if you code switch, I use code switching all day, every day, right? You wear different hats, it's different spaces, but I don't code switch to make somebody feel comfortable, because I'm, like I said, I love my grandmother. She's no longer here with me, but she gave us a whole plethora of wisdom, where she said, never get too comfortable to be uncomfortable. So I will never be in a space where I'm too comfortable to be uncomfortable. So that way I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable, because why should I downplay my talent, skills, and ability? Yes, and in the past, growing up, that's what I did. But now, as like Shakima said, I'm a seasoned woman. So as a seasoned woman, I am not here for that. I will, if it's going to make you feel uncomfortable, that's your issues, not mine, right? I love so much of me today, right? My self-love will not allow me to diminish who I am, will not allow me to sit down in a corner and be quiet. I'm not here for that anymore, right? And that's the language I want to use right now. I'm not here for that anymore.
I'm gonna give you 2 snaps for
No.
it.
I'll give you
So
2
now-
snaps,
yeah,
but
2
I just want to add that you're going to have high level of mistreatment. It does hurt us because, you're in a constant state of vigilance, whether those microaggressions was it because you weren't able to code switch at that particular moment. You're going to have those psychological traumas. You're going to question your relationship with your coworkers. Are they authentic? Do they like you for who you are? Or are you just the other colorful person in the room? I think that, you're constantly gonna have this feeling that you're being judged because you're using this either as code switching, and if you're using it to connect culturally with your community. And by that I mean, like, when you're at ALA conference, when I'm at ALA conference, I give the head nod to other BIPOC folks because there's so few of us in the room. But if you're using it as a way to navigate your workspaces that are not built around inclusion, you're going to fall the risk of having a lot of psychological trauma, because you're going to be dealing with that, again, what W.B. Du Bois said, that state of double consciousness, where you're not really being your true self. And then you're going to constantly judge your coworkers and question if you really are at the room because of the content of your character, as Martin Luther King would say.
Yes. I'm going to go to some of the questions in the comments, but before I do that, Peyton, anybody, did I leave anyone out?
Before you jump to the comments, one of the questions was just about, does code switching allow people to maintain racist thoughts? I don't know if we touched on that as much, but I just wanted to say that I think we need to realize that we live, in a society that was built on Eurocentric ideologies and structures. And it's a historical fact that when Europeans came here, they built institutions to purposely rob people of their culture and their language and their religious practices to replace them with their own. So what we have now is a result of that. And it's only fair to realize that these issues, are systematic. So in order to overcome racist thoughts of our colleagues, people in the workplace, the racist people are the ones that need to do the work, and not the other way around. Because, when people of color get into a place of assumed equality, they are still kept out because they don't look like everyone else, or dress like everyone else, or sound the same. So I want the people with the racist ideals to educate themselves and live in that awareness that all these obstacles and things that I had to overcome, just to be in the same room with you. So just to, touch on how it enforces racism, it's the people, that are the racists that need to do the work, not us.
No, that's a great point. And again, I think Shakima was saying, do they even realize that they're racist? Do they realize that they have their own bias? I mean, we all have our own personal bias, but you have to, realize it. So now I'm going to start with Lisa Allen. She comments, people at my job ask me, how can I wash my hair with my box braids? Would they ask somebody else how they wash their hair, please?
I get that question all the time.
And how do you address it?
My hair is different than yours. And, what I do is different from what you do. So that's it. You know, you don't have to worry about all the details of what I do. You know, if you're really that interested, look it up. It's not up to me to be the ambassador for everyone that has braids to answer all your questions, or be the ambassador for everybody Black, you know? So I feel like that's a microaggression, in that, you know, I'm supposed to be the spokesperson to tell you how Black people do everything.
The fact that they even asked about your hair just seems like, you know, it's that perception of professionalism.
Right.
You know, who's the authority on professionalism, right? Is it you because you wore box braids, or is it that person because they had the audacity to ask you at work whether or not you wash your hair, because of the way you decided to show up?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We get that all the time, and not just in the field of librarianship, but just in other careers as well. Just being a Black woman and being a strong Black woman is really difficult, you know, and just not difficult, but people try to make it difficult when you're strong. If you're assertive, they look at your assertiveness as being that you. Sometimes some people look at it as being cocky or being abrasive, but no, I'm just assertive. I am who I am. I'm here. I can deliver. I can speak on different topics. I can perform my work, my task at work. But it's just sometimes, you know, like you said, Peyton, people with their own personal racism, their own biases. But I'm at the point now, at the level in my career, that I'm all about being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually brings us to Pittsford Library. And they asked, what advice could you give a starter wanting to implement racial and social change in their work institutions? Someone who does not have the tenure and the years of experience and at a certain level of maturity, how does a young person be themselves and not suffer the negative repercussions?
I think understanding what you this can look like, you know, just being that part of the diverse workforce, welcoming opportunities and asking for your administration to welcome opportunities for multiple perspective, being innovative, and showing some of the skill sets that you're able to bring, and also pushing back on anyone who feels that it's the burden of the BIPAC staff to fit in, you know, providing those lib guides that we all probably created in the wake of the death of our unfortunate brothers and sisters, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, making sure that you hold them accountable. Did they read that? You want to have a discussion? Let's bring it up. And as Michelle said, you know, that feeling of uncomfortability, it helps move towards that workforce that is more inclusive and more, you know, aspirational of where we want to go within the profession.
And I think that if you don't feel comfortable doing it on your own, like just looking at the responses that we've had over these past few months to what's going on, you know that you're not alone. So just kind of seeing what colleagues you have, what allies you have in your work area, and talking to them, and then you going to the administration if you don't feel like you can do it on your own. No, you're not alone, and just finding who your allies are and bringing that up to them. I mean, we see that happening in Philadelphia, where they all together and said, we're not taking this anymore, and administration had to respond.
They said, bye-bye. That was their response, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So now our next question is from Karen Stephanites. How has moving to an all virtual environment this year affected BIPOC librarians, so Black, Indigenous, people of color librarians? Has the need for code switching increased or decreased with patrons, colleagues, and bosses? Interesting question.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. For myself personally, being in remote working online, actually, it has given me freedom to do the things that I want to do and take on challenges that I was operating out of a space of anxiety or operating out of a space of fear. For me personally, I actually looked at this time as a reset time. So I didn't operate from that space, but yes, I've had colleagues that operate from that space, and just, you know, being in remote world, it's hard for some people, especially for people who are extroverts. And, you know, if you look at personality, a true extrovert being in remote, looking at a camera, looking at a screen, for them, it's a little bit more difficult because they like to have that feedback. But for myself personally, it's gratifying. I don't have a problem with working remotely.
Yeah, I feel like I've had the same experience. I didn't mean to cut you off, Taina.
No, go ahead.
Where, you know, I haven't really had a issue with it. And I think that being on Zoom or, you know, any type of virtual meeting, I guess actually creates a space, in my experience, where everyone gets a chance to speak, because you have to go one by one. And nobody can really jump over each other like you can when you're in a room having a conversation freely. So I think maybe in my experience, it has presented more of an opportunity not to have to code switch, because my voice is, there's space for it to be heard.
Taina, did you want to join in?
Yeah, what I was gonna say is, in the beginning, it was different. You know, I feel like in multiple Zoom meetings, whether it's like with parent groups or with my colleagues, with our RUSA committee, typically like we're like traveling, for instance, like we're like traveling across the country to go visit these individuals, and now we can see each other on a frequent basis. I don't feel like it was freedom. I just felt like those subsidies, those subtle ways that you can know when to code switch kind of gets eliminated. Like people are now inviting us into their homes, into their bedrooms. So I think what in those spaces we were able to leverage an opportunity for us to kind of have a shared speech habit, you know, set some ground norms, group norms. We're able to kind of like enlarge our vocabulary and be more accepting, but it didn't come, you know, easy. I think we were kind of like forced to kind of have these opportunities to understand each other and accept multi-dialects, because we're interacting with a lot more people outside of our similar circle. So I'm not like just leveraging and just talking to managers. I'm talking to people across all broad spectrums. I'm talking to people who are directors and leaders and frontline staff members. And we were not all on the same page. Even though, you know, standard English is like the dominant culture, we do know that people come to library profession through a myriad of ways and from different points. But leveraging these technologies allowed us to really have an understanding of shared, or multiply the opportunities to have shared language. My computer
I
went bad.
do want to take it the other route. So when we were all locked up and folks couldn't make it to the salon, and some people, they have problems. They don't go to the salon. They get a shower, they wash their hair, they could get on the camera. And then you started seeing throughout the weeks, some cameras were off because I guess you didn't want your colleagues to see you with maybe a scarf or whatever. I'm speaking for personal experience, but also some jobs started saying you cannot turn your cameras off.
Yes.
And then some people were starting, you know, oh, that's a nice picture you got in background. So it was that other side of welcoming people inside your home that you would have never had that kind of interaction with at work.
So it kind of exposes that you do not fit in. Like, right. Oh, I see you have those African statues in the background. I don't have those African statues in the background. I see you like plants. I didn't know you like plants. And so, yeah, It now, you know, if you were code switching and you weren't your authentic self to show similar interests, these Zoom conversations kind of expose that if you didn't have like a wall, if you didn't dress up or
Anyone else?
I think it's interesting, you know, that you bring up the headscarf, you know, and, you know, the hair might not quite be right that day. Code switching physically or in my appearance is not really a part of something that I do. I always, you know, either have type of braids or I'm like a big person. But in the event that my hair is just not doing what I want that day, I will definitely put a scarf on and wear like a top knot. That's not something I've ever really been afraid of. And, you know, my coworkers, you know, used to comment on it, you know, originally, but it's not a norm now. So it's not something that I get called out on about because I've made it so normal for everyone else because it's a part of me that I refuse to change.
It's for me, it's different because it's not something, like I said, it's my weekend hair or my weekend style, right? And then do it for work. But it's like now what I've been doing is, listen, y'all gonna get this scarf today because I'll do the edges for you, but that's about it. Because at this point, it's like I am bringing me. And I think once again, as I'm getting older, it's just those are the things that I'm going to do to make myself comfortable. Because why am I going to make you comfortable and then make myself small? I'm not do it like Michelle said. Like Michelle said, I'm not doing that anymore. So these earrings in the shape of the continent, you will see that head wrap, you will see that African art, you will see that sweater representing Black people. You will see those books by Black authors. You will see those movies by Black directors. You will hear about, like, these things are starting to come out in me. Like I'm not hiding that anymore.
Loud.
Passionate. Exactly what that's for. You're very passionate about what you're saying.
I do want to share a nice comment from Caroline Bennett Glauda. Sorry if I didn't say that correct. But Sandra and Taina, I've had the pleasure of seeing both of you present on areas of your expertise. You presented in a way that made your content accessible to the audience, and both of you had a way of also bringing your authentic self into the room. I like getting this chance to hear more about your personal experience in the workplace. And Taina, I hope I pronounce, well, I'm saying the name, so there we go. You did spell it correctly. She says, I always get nervous on stage that I feel like I stumble. Okay, I don't know. But you got a shout out from Ms.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you.
I put my little clap thing.
You put your hand up. All right,
Yeah.
I'll do the clap. I'll do the clap in my
Oh,
corner.
wait.
Go.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to read all of these, but they're being shared with me at the moment. So let me go on to the next one that was shared with me. Sorry about this. While I'm looking for the next question, someone was saying yes to the scarves and the head wraps. They said they are fashionable and they need to learn how to love it. I agree. But at some point, even my hair wasn't even going underneath a scarf. It was like, goodbye. Okay, so the next question. Cheryl McNeil says, I'm working hard to be an anti-racist white woman, but I have definitely said things that are racist. Microaggressions, but please, racist. It's a constant struggle to learn. I have a Black husband, but I struggle a lot with my biases. Thank you for being transparent, Cheryl McNeil. Any thoughts on that? So she realizes that at a time she came off and said something that wasn't right. Is there any way? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would start with microaggressions. haven't been on the receiving end of microaggression, right? I'll just think that, you know, what you feel is good for yourself will be good for me as a Black woman. You know, I'll share a story. I had a position and they were doing cuts, reductions in salary, layoffs, budgetary things going on. And I was sitting in the office with my dean, and my dean looked me square in my face and said, you know, the only reason why I'm cutting your salary is because if anybody on my team could endure this pay cut, it would be you, because I know that you would get out here and roll up your sleeves and make it happen for yourself. And it took everything I had in me to call on Jesus and everyone else not to lose it. And my response back to her was that I'm appalled by what you're saying because you don't know my financial situation. My financial situation will be just the same as the other colleagues that I work with that may own a house and a car. So me enduring a $25,000 pay cut at that time, how could you say I would get out and roll up my sleeves and make it happen for myself? That's $25K. So I think that starting with the microaggression, think about what you would say, how you would want somebody to say something to you. Now, she could have rephrased that in a different way, saying that, you know, I enjoy, you know, you have that tenacity, you have that will, you show that, you know, you demonstrate on time and time again that you're able to think quick on your feet. How would this work out for you? And I feel like microaggression starts with you assuming that because I'm Black she assumed that because I was Black that I could handle this pay cut, but she never stopped to think that, hey, she's a woman, she has kids. At that moment, my daughter was in college, at a private college. So losing $25K was not an easy pill to swallow, but yeah, I bounced back because that's who I am. But the fact is, as a white woman, just think about some of the things that you would say. It was like a compliment and a slap in the face at the same time. So rephrasing it would have been a better way and it would have been received better. I'm just proud of myself today that I didn't lose it.
High five to you, yeah.
And just to echo what Michelle is saying, you know, being an anti-racist is everyday work. It's not just something you can think about one day and then it's like you're cured of it. No, it's something that you have to work at every day, you know, to make other people feel comfortable and to make other people feel respected. So like Michelle said, you have to think before you speak. Is this something that maybe could be uncomfortable, you know, and if you have to even question it, then maybe you shouldn't say it. You know, so just thinking first about, you know, respecting other people's space and their feelings, I think is the first step. But becoming an anti-racist is something you have to work out every day.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you know, take the time to reach out to those colleagues that you may have offended or angered by those remarks. See how they feel about it. See what are the growth opportunities that you both can come to a conclusion in order to make sure that you are creating a work environment and a working culture where they feel accepted and that they feel that they too can kind of pivot those views. And as Peyton said, it does take work. You know, things are not going to be imperfect. Don't worry about getting it right the first time, but apology goes a long way. And recalling that interaction, and seeing, you know, where you can come to a consensus with your BIPOC staff, if they were the ones, or your managers, whoever you may have offended with those language, and really have those hard conversations. Start with, you know, those hard conversations and where you can systematically change things if you're in a position of power, and where you can build allyship and trust, because saying something hurtful that angers someone really, you know, it severs the trust that that person would have with you. And how can they trust that you have their back? So you really have to do a little bit more groundwork and making sure that you build up your allyship with your team and are looked at a little bit differently.
And I would also say, if you're having those conversations with people, it's making sure that you're actually listening to what they're saying and not being ready to defend. So it's something that we all do. If someone says something to us and we think it's against, you know, like if someone would outright say you were racist, like that comment was racist, it might be in you to be like, no, I'm not racist, and throw it back on them. But you have to be willing to listen to what they've said and acknowledge that their feelings come above what you meant and correct that.
Good point. And now we're going to take that same question, we're going to take it to another level. So, have you seen your white counterpart interact with a patron that may be Black, African American, person of color, in a certain way because it might be perceived that they're, you know, less educated, lower socioeconomic, you know, they're just treated differently? How have you worked that out?
I think that's an interesting question because it's definitely something that I've seen. And I think it's interesting because, you know, the fact that I have the ability to code switch, which is something all people of color can do, only becomes a benefit to my white counterparts when there is a patron that they feel like makes them uncomfortable or doesn't look like all of a sudden everybody gets busy. All of a sudden now my skill set to be able to do that is a positive, when any other time, you know, it can be looked at as a negative. So I think that is an interesting question. It's definitely something I experience a lot.
So you just take it on. You just take the situation on to just even save the patron from being, you know, not treated fairly.
Sometimes I will, only because I know that maybe their questions won't get answered appropriately, or, you know, that they won't be serviced the way that they should. You know, I can see that their service is not going to be equal to somebody else, you know, from somebody else. So, you know, I will do it. And then I, you know, give an example to my coworkers of what it should look like, because it's just any other patron, you know. So I'm just going to handle this patient like I would any other patron, you know, and you guys should be ashamed of yourselves for thinking that you wouldn't be able to deal with this, or that you should be fearful, because it's just another patron. We're, you know, a library, people come here for our services. Everybody should be treated the same.
Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
With that question, I know recently we're within my organization, we're talking a lot about how to respond effectively to external factors that are impacting a community of color. And that's like, you know, when do we call the police, and working that stuff out. And so we are inviting these conversations because, again, we weren't all at the same level, and we didn't see things as microaggressions, or we didn't see things as detrimental to a class of people who, by no choice of their own, had the librarian call the cops on them. And so I think this instant, now that we all have like a heightened sense of awareness, what I'm doing is really empowering my colleagues to kind of think about what those ramifications are when they do call 911. Like, for instance, as we're reopening, you know, is it within reason to call 911 on somebody who comes into the library without wearing a mask? And we're not at that point yet where they're like fully in the library, but it's something that we should be thinking about, and not really be reactionary. And it's a larger discussion, and we're all coming at it from a different set of ways. But I know right now, from the other way, as you mentioned, like doing it from the other side, I think that's what I'm trying to bring and offer to the table.
Thank you. So now Dolly asks, how would you approach changing the color of library boards to represent more Black folks?
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because I actually just did a presentation to a board, and my presentation was language is power, and how we use language to get there and what language has to do. But I would say starting with a junior board, having worked in philanthropy and fundraising and all that for quite some time prior to, it's starting with a junior board. And a junior board will then take and be able to build other people into it and understanding it. And also for people of color, you can't get to the board if you don't understand the board, right? So for yourself, if you had an interest, volunteering, volunteer service, volunteer to be at a board someplace else where you can build those skills at a nonprofit organization. Your local nonprofit organization are always looking for board members. So start there, and so that you can get the skills, because you're going to need the skill set in order to sit on a library board. Because most of the people of color that I know that end up on a library board, they wait till you retire to put you on there. In retirement, you can get those coveted seats once you leave retirement, retire from a library system. But I think building those skill set and calling attention to yourself, doing something as a board member at a nonprofit board will help you get to the board.
Spot on. Spot on. I do want to go to Viviette White. She says, one of the major problems of moving forward in our profession and daily interactions with other races is that they see our race as being less than. That is why when we do the top of our game, our worth is seen as a threat. We need more people who are Black, not just people of color, to be in decision-making positions in our workplaces and organizations and in our government. So she just said, look, we just got to be in charge all around. Any thoughts?
I mean, I definitely agree, with what she's saying, that we do need more, people of color, Black people especially, in positions of authority. And, I forgot the second part of her question, but, I definitely agree with that. Oh, that we're threatening when we are, showing our skills. I definitely agree with that. When people, non-people of color can, white people see that you are well-spoken, they are threatened, I feel like. And then, all of a sudden they're just kind of taken back, well, maybe I shouldn't give her so many opportunities, or, why does she always have to say something? Like, you can feel the aggression coming, at least in my experience, because my work environment is predominantly white and everyone that's in charge is white. So I've definitely felt that, and I definitely agree, with those sentiments. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
I do not have anything to add to that because I'm going to go to the next question. I mean, we have a lot of questions, so I'm just trying to get through them in the, 15 minutes we have left. And I mean, these questions they're getting there, I tell you. So now, Carl Andrews asks, is the term Juneteenth considered Ebonics? I didn't consider it Ebonics. That's what we called it, but just what? It's a question.
No, that's the language that was adopted by those slaves who unfortunately did not get the news that they were free 2 years earlier. That's the way they will celebrate, and that's the way that they wanted to call that celebration. It is the language. It's not Ebonics. It's not looked at as less than any other dominant language. That's the name.
Did we freeze?
No, we didn't freeze. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah, go ahead. You have something
yeah.
like
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Lori Special, she asked about unions. She said what they are and what is their importance. I tell you.
Ooh. Having managed union staff. Okay, so where you, I know you can't answer me right now, but here in New York State, unions were created back in the 1930s to prevent child labors and work labor laws and those things, where that making sure that people work within their titles. and didn't do extra work. That's what unions were started for, you know, just also to protect the rights of workers, because back then, a lot of employers did not deem workers, they wanted workers to work 12, 15, 20 hours with no breaks and things of that nature. So when unions were started, they were started as a great thing. Certain library systems throughout the country may have maybe unionized positions, and those positions are, you know, you get, for me personally, working at a large system when I worked at Queens Library, it was things that you couldn't do if you were a union staff member that you could do when you were a non-union staff member. And Shantae's shaking her head because she's worked in grant-funded positions too. And I feel personally that the grant-funded position affords you that opportunity to build your skills. Whereas if you were a children's librarian and you were underneath the union line where the city, because let me backtrack. Here in New York City, our libraries are quasi-governmental, which means that they're operate in their own independently, but they also are government entities and certain government jobs. And so basically, for me personally, I noticed that we have union staff members that will tell you that's not my job. That's not in that's not listed in my job. They won't take on a new project or work outside that title because that's not my title and that's not my line that I'm paid off of. But I say personally, as a Black person, as a Black woman, if I was boxed into a union job, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. The fact that I worked outside, didn't have union positions, and I worked in grant-funded position, it allowed me latitude to build my skill set. Anybody else from the union want to talk about it? I'm not currently in the union anymore, but.
I mean, I'm glad you talked about, because that was a challenging question, actually.
Okay.
And now I'm going to go to the last question, so at least all of you could have an ending remark. So Simone L. General, hi Simone, asks, do you find that you sometimes have to dim your light to avoid coming across as the angry Black woman?
I would say that yes, I used to, because I didn't want to be uncomfortable. I think at that point it wasn't about anyone else's comfort, it was about my own. And in many cases, like in the department that I worked in, and actually even where I work now, I am one of the few Black people, and in one department was the only person of color in that whole department. And so it was about just kind of keeping myself small and quote dimming my light. But one of the stories that I share with people is that what changed me is I had a little girl. And I thought about all of the things that I want her to be, then that's the representation that I have to reflect to her. And so all of those things changed. So having her has definitely given me the courage and the confidence to be like, no, I'm not going to make myself small for you. I'm sorry. Well, not sorry. But yeah. And I think it also takes some maturity and some experience. Like, I think most people will get to that point if they allow themselves to get there.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, it comes with experience. I'm not one of those people that dims my light either. You know, if I have something to say, I'm definitely outspoken about it, but that's, you know, how I was raised. Shout out to my mom. You know, she told me I was special, so I need everybody else to know that too. And you know, it's not something that I let people do to me, because if you're going to see me as, you know, a competition to you or equal, I can't dim my light. You know, even though I know you may want me to, you know, I'm not going to do it because I'm here and I matter and my position matters. So, you know, but like I said, it comes with experience and comfort. You know, but that's not something, you know, that I have done. I do, or I have sometimes chosen, you know, a certain tone or words. So I guess that would be the code switch, just to seem, I don't know, not so aggressive, but I'm definitely passionate So I let that passion come across, you know, without any qualms or hesitations.
Right. In this instance, you know, with that question, to dim your light, to not appear, whether or not you are seen as the angry Black woman, in some instances, you're either coping, you're conforming, or you're resisting. And so which one you choose, either through lived experience or because you're trying to identify, like, where do you see yourself within that cultural norm of that institution, those are again, that's a tool. And if that means that I have to cope in order to move my project along or move what I have to say along, then I know how to pick my battles. And some things, for the sake of winning an argument, isn't worth fighting for. I can better utilize my energy towards making the difference that I want to see. If that's to bring, you know, more, someone said the board, if that's to bring more funding to the institution to support the role and the ideas of where libraries can meet the needs, then that's where I'm going to direct my attention. If that means that I have to conform because, you know, my idea might not have been the strongest in the room, but someone else had thought through a better solution, it's okay to kind of to know that, okay, you know, it wasn't maybe my plan wasn't well thought, ideas that way. So I wouldn't quite say diminishing at that moment. I just take it as a growth opportunity to know where I can really be more impactful in the organization and bring myself to that direction. So that's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Michelle, do you have anything?
I know I'm over here nodding. I agree with Taina. I just feel like you just have to know the space. I mean, I was, you know, we have degrees, but then we also have common sense, right? And common sense teaches us that we, you know the space. I mean, I jokingly with my students tell them all the time, I have 5 degrees, and they laugh at me saying, how did you get 5 degrees? I'm like, yeah, I have a bachelor's and 2 masters, but I also have 2 PhDs, which I call common sense that my mother gave me from her university, right? Common sense university, you got to give that to mommy. And then I just happened to, you know, just know that, you know, that mother wit that she gave you too. So, and just knowing the space, you just have to know your environment. It's not to say that you need to diminish who you are, but there's an old saying that says there's a time and a place for everything, right? Okay. Learn the time, learn the place, move in the spaces how you need to move in the space, remain true to your authentic self, but just know your environment. That's like when you want to do a pitch. You have a business that you're selling and you want to do a pitch about your business. You had to go and learn about that background of that business and know the environment. So my suggestion is learn the environment, know your environment, and there's a time and a place for everything. Never diminish who you are, but utilize things when you need to utilize them and show when you need to show it. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Mm-hmm.
I mean, after that, I'm ready to pass the plate because you was preaching good over there. But I do want to point out that Cheryl said she is not going to dim her light. We have Anita Bauman, who says, it brings tears to my eyes that any person should have to dim their light to be accepted in any human interaction. This is a sad obligation for anyone to have to carry with them as they walk through the world. And it is sad. It is sad.
It is sad.
But this is what people are dealing with. This I don't want to end on this sad note. We have literally 2 minutes. Any closing remarks before I do the end spiel? Please.
There's something that Mrs. Mack put here, our member from the NYBLC, she said, so interesting. I'm happy that I listened in. I never lowered my standards for myself and my staff, right? And that's a good note to end on, right? Think about that, not lowering your standards for yourself. And if you happen to be in a leadership position, lower the standards for your staff. Everyone should be held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Shantae, you on mute?
I am supposed to tell everybody about the next conversation that's being scheduled,
Yes.
but this maneuvering into the chat is really challenging at this point because people keep putting more stuff. So the next conversation is
Ah. Wait, let me click on it.
imposter syndrome.
There you go.
So please come back. We have our next conversation, number 2, August 7th, 2020. You do not want to miss it. The topic is imposter syndrome. Are you pretending to be somebody you're not? That's what that means. And
Well,
that is at the same time. There we go. Thank you. That is it. Oh, that is
just
beautiful.
came in today.
That is gorgeous. Is it the same time at 11:30?
Yes, it is the same time.
Okay.
We do want to thank our gracious Rebecca Rod and Emily Dowie for putting this together. This was a great presentation. Hand claps to our members, Rebecca and Emily. Thank you so much. I am in gratitude for this experience.
Oh, somebody said show it again, Michelle. Show the picture again.
You want me to put in the chat?
Yeah, put in the chat. And do we have information on how people could sign up for the next one? Because we want to top this.
Right?
Yeah, we're going to be sending out the information through social media by Monday for you all to sign up. It'll also be in our bio. If you enjoyed it today, I can go ahead and send it out to those of you who registered for this event so that at least you know what it will be, how to sign up. Really appreciate you guys for being here. Thank you so much to our moderator, our panelists. We could not have pulled this off without you. Thank you so very much for doing this and being a part of this conversation. Thank you, Jeremy, for showing up and being here and supporting us as well. And so on behalf of the New York Black Librarians Caucus, thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. And we ended on time.
Yes.
Thank you to everyone that showed up. This was such an engaging conversation. We can keep going. We can keep going. And the chat is still going.
Chat is still going.
That is still going. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Peyton. Thank you, Shamika. Thank you, Shantae.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome.
Right, I'm out.
Now code switching. We are out.
Bye, everyone.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Piano out.